And now, for our final overview of today's Megatrends, please welcome Skift Senior Travel Tech Editor, Sean O'Neill.
Hello. I'll now dive into 6 megatrends that have the common theme of the lasting impact of the pandemic on the travel sector. We'll start first with the great upskilling of labor. We'll also talk about how remote work is leading to a new socialization of business travel. We'll look at how corporate travel is firmly in the grip of the CFO. We'll also look at the event sector and how it's having a reset. We'll look at how premium leisure is seeing a boom in air travel. And lastly, we'll look at the last mile, how many travel companies are trying to stitch together the last mile of travel. Let's start with the great upskilling of labor. The gap between the number of jobs that are available and the number of people willing to fill them is too great in many countries of the world. In the United States, it's especially bad. I'll show you now this slide from my colleague Seth Borko of Skift Research. It shows the number of weeks on average it takes to fill open jobs in the accommodation and food service sector. As you can see, clearly the pandemic didn't cause this problem. It's been a problem that's been around for several years. And hotels in particular are having a problem. If you take a look at this next slide from McKinsey & Company, you'll see that upskilling is a greatest problem in the accommodation and food service sector. Upskilling is what is needed most in accommodation and food services. So why is that? If we look at this next slide from Deloitte, you'll see that the sector has a large number of employees who lack a higher education. But another reason is that many employers, such as Amazon, have been bidding up wages, and hotels have been having a hard time competing. One other thing that we'll notice is, what is the solution to this problem? And upskilling is the answer. Upskilling is training employees to try out different new skills, to be able to try different positions within an organization. It's more than just training. It is about putting a structure in place to make it clear what the path is for career development and what the opportunities are for career advancement. It's also an opportunity for companies to meet their diversity, equity, and inclusion goals, sort of as we heard earlier today from Kayak's CEO, Steve Hafner, that when he looks for jobs, job filling and training, DEI is an important topic for him. Let's take an example of United Airlines. They have the Aviate Flight Academy. The goal of United Airlines is to hire 5,000 workers to be new pilots by 2030. They're hoping that half of these pilots will be women and underrepresented minorities. The Aviate program is going to help hire and create more pilots and fill a gap when many pilots are hitting the retirement age between now and 2030. I'll use another example from outside the United States. Marriott International has partnered with the Cornell University, in order to create a program in Saudi Arabia. The Tassin hospitality program helps train locals, giving them opportunities to see different job functions throughout a hotel, moving from, say, food and beverage into human resources. The program has had a 70% retention rate so far, and it has about a third of the participants have seen a promotion. Marriott is looking to have iterations of this and expand it to Egypt and Bahrain. We'll hear more about upskilling, which is a much deeper topic, in a panel discussion in a little bit. But first, let's dive into a next megatrend, which is that remote work is defining a new socialization for business travel. What you're seeing now is that a lot of companies have discovered, they've had this big experiment in decentralized work. And this is creating an opportunity for many travel companies to build businesses to try to help solve the pain point of planning on-sites, off-sites, and other team gatherings. If you've ever tried to plan a company retreat on your own, you know what a nightmare it can be trying to figure out the logistics. And so several companies are trying to enter into this space and make it easier. Skift Research has been studying this phenomenon. Back in October, they did a study, and they found that right now about 40% of survey respondents are still in remote or hybrid work. Now compare that to the pre-pandemic number. The US Census found that about 5% of Americans pre-pandemic were working full-time remote. So there has been a big jump, and that means that there's a big opportunity for travel businesses to try to super serve the remote work community. A couple of travel specialist providers that have come in include Next Retreat and Troop. These two companies have raised a lot of funds in the past couple of years to seize this opportunity. And we're going to take a look in a moment here at a little video from Next Retreat, which will show you sort of the premise of what they offer.
It's simple. You enter the departure point of your team, and if your team is distributed like ours, you can enter as many different departure points as you need. You can browse through curated properties, create lists of your favorite hotels and villas to share with your team and get the feedback. Next Retreat then automatically recommends the best destinations, so you get to choose from places where all your team members can travel easily.
So that's Next Retreat. Another company is Branches. Branches offers remote workers an opportunity to do deep work sessions in nature. Meanwhile, other players include corporate travel agencies, Travel Perk, and Trip Actions, which have been trying to provide more services to help appeal to meeting and event planners and the travel managers and executive assistants who often are responsible for planning retreats and offsites. Other players have also been getting into the game. TUI has been developing workcations with the idea that trying to encourage people to add on remote working on either side of a vacation in this era of remote and hybrid work. Some other companies include Club Med, which are trying to take advantage of their properties in the off-season and reconfigure them for remote work locations. Another megatrend that we're covering is how corporate travel is now firmly in the grip of the CFOs. Many companies discovered in the past couple of years that they can run their businesses without needing as much business travel. Amazon, for example, said that it saved nearly $1 billion on travel-related expenses in 2020. So many companies will want to keep some of the savings even as we come out of the pandemic. As we discussed earlier today, some analysts see that for a couple of years, corporate travel may be down 15% from 2019 levels. So there have been several players that are sort of responding to this. One reason why corporate CFOs have more of a grip on how travel is spending is that there's been some technical changes from companies. So providers of expense management solutions, such as American Express Global Business Travel. They have a Neo One product. BCD Travel has a BCD Pay product. Trip Actions introduced Liquid. These expense management systems are feeding into travel management programs, and it's giving more visibility to CFOs. A new startup called Sales Trip sits on top of Salesforce, and it helps predict how profitable a particular business trip might be for a company, and so it'll be approved. Whether the trip will be approved and how big the trip budget will be will depend on their analysis of the Salesforce data. So looking at some data here, this slide from BCD Travel shows that finance and accounting has become the #1 part of corporations that collaborate with travel programs. And looking ahead, many companies may cap their business travel because of climate change issues as they look to cap their emissions. I'll move ahead to our next megatrend, which is about the event sector. The event sector, if you generally look at it, tends to have 3 tiers. There's the largest tier is big events. You think of Lisbon's Web Summit, think of ITB Berlin. Then there's a middle tier, events that are big enough that they require international travelers in order to be cost effective and appealing. And then you have small businesses, such as community-based local businesses. Events. So if you look at these 3 tiers of events, the ones that will thrive coming out of the pandemic are the largest and the smallest. The mid-tier, however, are going to struggle, according to Skift's sister brand, EventMB. EventMB has done some research in their one of their recent reports. They found that on average, 60% of respondents predict future events will be smaller in size, and a further 42% expect them to be more local. Meanwhile, about 63% are expecting events to have more virtual and hybrid formats. One of the companies that is benefiting from this is Hopin, which has raised a large amount of money to capitalize on the hybrid and virtual events trend. Bizzabo is another player in the sector that has raised a lot of funding recently. These platforms can be helpful, but for mid-sized boutique events, it's very hard. EventMB research has found that monetizing events in a virtual or remote format, if you're a mid-sized event, is very challenging. They offer no guarantees of additional reach when compared to equivalent in-person events. So EventMB sort of like says that if you are running a mid-sized event, you need to sort of tread cautiously. You can learn more about this by downloading our Megatrends PDF that's free. I'll now go to our next megatrend, which is about the rise of premium leisure in air travel. My colleagues at Airline Weekly have found that there has been a lot of airline executives saying they see robust strength in premium economy seats. So much so that some airlines are actually reconfiguring their cabins. Delta is going to be adding more premium economy to its Boeing 767s. British Airways is going to be adding some premium economy to its jets. And there's no greater example of airlines actually responding to demand than actually making changes to their physical infrastructure, because it costs money and has a real operational lag time. And so airlines are investing for good reason, and that's because premium economy tends to be the most profitable cabin on the plane. And this ties into some of our previous megatrends, because what you're seeing is that as corporate travel is much more in the tighter grip of CFOs, people are not being allowed to fly in business travel as much, but also because remote work is leading to a new socialization of business travel. A lot of people are adding leisure trips, so-called business and leisure trips, and so they're adding on some leisure, and they're willing to upgrade from an economy class to premium leisure. So we expect to see more strength in this to come. Our last megatrend is about how travel's last mile will spark a new wave of innovation. Many airlines have been investing in how to sort of connect and take the pain out of that last mile of trip, say from a hub airport to a downtown area, whether it's a downtown heliport or a rail station. This is about a boom in EVTOLs, or electric vehicle takeoff and landing, better known as air taxis. They look a little bit like oversized drones. I apologize here. Here's our slide, some oversized drones. And these used to be the stuff of science fiction, but they are expected to fly up to 4 passengers at a time, up to 50 miles. So one example route of a typical EVTOL use, according to my colleagues at Airline Weekly, would be that a passenger arrives at Los Angeles Airport and Los Angeles International after a 17-hour flight from, say, Singapore. They want to connect to Orange County. That's an hour away, a 40-mile drive. The airline, it's not really practical to add on a flight there, but it's an unpleasant last leg of commuting. And so an air taxi could come in and sort of plug the gap. United and several other airlines, including Virgin Atlantic, have been pouring money into the companies that are doing this, such as Archer Aviation and Whisk. Airbus Helicopters is also developing a prototype. Climate change is a factor here that's driving these companies to be invested heavily in last mile innovation, because many travel suppliers need to reduce their carbon impact. In Germany, Lufthansa has been partnering with Deutsche Bahn in order to have a lot more intercity rail service. And so what they'll do is on 22 routes, they have Sprinter train service that connects to their Frankfurt airport hub with outlying cities such as Munich and Nuremberg. So Lufthansa expects to have about 500,000 passengers on rail as we come out of the pandemic. So to wrap up, it's certainly very clear that uncertainty is the new certainty, and that one of the biggest trends is that I've talked about most recently here is upskilling. So I'm now going to turn it over for a panel discussion on upskilling led by my colleague Cameron Spirns. Thank you.